Hi, I'm Evelyn.
I'm Alexis.
I'm Katie.
And I'm Anna.
We are the Marmalade Mermaids. This week, our flag named Hope, Season 2, Episode 5.
The Curse of Seafaring Life.
Thank you, Evelyn. Between 1 and 321.
Wow. 253.
Ooh. Okay, Fang says shh, and Ed says, I know what that means. I just want to. And then Fang says shush again. Okay, so do we know what happens at that part of the
Literally,
episode?
they're sitting on the ship, like on a little dinghy, just Fang and Ed, and they are catching some fishies. And Ed is trying to talk about things, and Fang says, do you think that you can't just like be quiet because you don't want to be quiet with yourself and like sit with your thoughts? And Ed is like, no, I can do that, and keeps talking. And Fang's like, no, shh, just be quiet.
All right, well done. Okay, so shh, I know what that means. I just want to. And then the shush again. Where do we see that in other stories or places? It feels like bickering, like a little bit of a bicker. So I'm thinking about times in shows when characters bicker.
Yeah, I think a lot, not just bickering, but like a lot of environments, like when people are in real life and in uh, things that you read, fictional situations, when people are in a library, or when people are like in a funeral. It's a lot of time when we're like, stop talking, just be quiet and sit here.
Yeah, because the invitation here is like just be quiet, and then Ed's struggling to just be quiet. And that's a good example of where like we see that in movies, we see that in shows where you're supposed to be quiet, but people struggle to.
Well, and then the after show reminds me so much of Elizabeth Gilbert's Eat, Pray, Love, when she's trying to meditate and she's just ultra aware of every single one of her thoughts. And she's like, I'm not going to be quiet. I can't just sit here and be quiet. Like, it's that same kind of, even our internal monologue, sometimes it's hard to quiet.
Yeah, for some reason, I don't know if this works, but you asked the question, like the first thing that came to mind was Castaway with Tom Hanks, where I remember like when the movie came out, which was a long time ago, but people being like, oh, like it's this like there's however many minutes it is of just him like on this island by himself. And then like at the time there was this big deal about, the fact that there's Wilson, there's this volleyball where he has this period where he's all by himself and he is just quiet. He's kind of like doesn't really even talk to himself. He's making some kind of sometimes some sounds and a couple of things, but that's about it. But then the volleyball comes up and all of a sudden like he has this handprint and he's like, oh, he can see a face in it. And then that becomes the person that he's talking to. And it becomes this person that's real for him. Anyway, and again, I don't know if that how that completely connects in, but that's the first thing I thought about was thinking about like, oh yeah, we can just be quiet. It's like actually we can't. And we're going to, make people out of volleyballs and we're going to have relationships in the sense of like this is a friendship that I have with this person that I care about very much because we're just people and we need community. And so that idea of trying to be quiet can be really hard for some people. For me, it's like easy. I'm like, okay, just don't talk. But that doesn't mean that there's not anything going on internally. That means there's that big conversation where I think you're right. Like what Fang is talking about is maybe more of this contemplation, meditative time where you're just supposed to be kind of like letting things just be still, which again is very hard for people because that's not how we work.
Yeah. I think the setting there, fishing, is perfect because that's classically like, don't be loud, you'll scare the fishes away. Like you have to sit still, let them come to you. It can be a meditative state for fishermen.
For sure. I feel like there's probably some connection to a river runs through it, but I've never seen that movie. So we'll just say it could be I hope that there's some sort of connection for people who enjoy fishing with that.
Way to bring it back to the theme.
Thank you.
I think too I liked the example you brought up, Anna, but it also makes me think of how many times, particularly in movies and film, that there's this editorial choice where they're like, do we trust our audience enough to sit with silence? And to me, like, I remember as a little kid watching The Red Balloon and some like shorter, I mean, they feel like forever, right? But the shorter silent movies. Um, and then I think the most powerful recent experience was Everything Everywhere All at Once, when they just like, we're just gonna be a rock. And it was just silence. And then when they were speaking, it was written. And there's no auditory component to that. And I just love it. It's very powerful to me and peaceful feeling.
Yeah, I think that's a really good moment to bring up with when they're rocks. And that your comment made me think of Terrence Malick and his movies, where there are long stretches where there's no dialogue at all. It's sometimes the musings of the characters, but a lot of the times it's just these images, and you're getting a passage of time, you're getting, you know, the what's happening in this environment, and that in of itself is the story. It's not necessarily anything, not even written, any sort of narrative that you can kind of hang on to as an audience member. And again, I think it's an interesting choice. Just there's so many different ways to tell a story. But yeah, Terrence Malick is someone I definitely think of. The New World, where there's just these long passages of no talking whatsoever. And it's not even that you're trying to connect a story or a plot to the images that you're seeing, you're just experiencing them.
In the clip, what was the invitation Fang said? Like, he's like, do you think you talk so much because
You don't want to know how to sit with yourself. And then
so
he
that
says, I bet you can't stay quiet long enough to catch a fish.
yeah, so the invitation was just sit with yourself.
Yeah, and I do think it's interesting that Ed tries to turn it into a game. He's like, "Oh, we're playing a game," and Fang's like, "No, we're not." And then Ed kind of comes back with, "Ha, another game." He's like, "No, we're just sitting. We're just being." And I think it's also too, the invitation is to be with yourself, to be just inside your own head.
Well, and it's
And
a lovely juxtaposition, right? Like, sorry, Alexis. It's a lovely juxtaposition because Fang and Ed were just having that conversation about the knife parade. And Fang was like, that was not a game. I was not having fun. That was not playful. And he was like, what? Oh, I didn't know that. And now Fang is trying to ask Ed to do this thing, and it's as bad as a knife parade for him. He does not want to do it. So he tries to make it a game, and even then, it's not working super well. Sorry,
I
Alexis,
had
what were you going to say?
oh, I just hadn't thought of his game playing as kind of a coping thing, because we see it earlier in the episode too. He's quite playful in this episode. Even like when he's talking to the door that he's fixing, it's kind of playful. He's like, when he goes into the water, he's like, I'm gonna cannonball. And he's just kind of childlike in those moments. And yeah, I hadn't thought of like, well, that's, it just reminds me also of the other guy with the stabby parties. I don't know what, Calico Jack. And like everything was a game, and like, oh, it's time for this and that. And maybe that's just how they coped. And so that's how Ed knows.
Yeah, I think that's very interesting, because I'm trying to think about how I would classify Izzy in that mode, because he's very yelly, but he's also very quiet and just watchful at times. Like he seems to have this really good ability to just take in what's going on, um, without trying to make it a game, and without trying to, again, like he seems to approach pirating very differently than Calico Jack, or you know, Mary or Annie. And again, like he has a lot of those pirate qualities, but he does seem to be very reflective and very able to kind of just be able to figure out what's going on, and what's working and what's not working, because he can pick up things. He's very perceptive about picking up things. And I do think it's interesting that Calico Jack and Ed are two examples of, they're aware that, you know, there's other stimulation happening outside of them, but there it's all about like how can they make that playful and exciting for themselves. And that doesn't seem to be Izzy's intentions when he has stuff that he sees that he's like, this is making me uncomfortable. But I don't know.
Izzy can definitely sit with himself.
In constructive and destructive ways, right? He can do, but he is a pirate through and through. Like he knows himself. Not that people who don't sit with themselves don't know themselves. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's interesting to think about how Ed's ways of coping or making things games can be helpful. Like can help you get through maybe some hard things as a pirate. Or thinking about like his talking to the door. Of he's not getting upset, like, oh my gosh, I gotta fix this door. He's like, hey, Mr. Door, like it's not your fault. That was me. I broke you. Let's fix you. Let's get you back together. And again, it's a very kind way to approach the task. And so in sewing, there's this thing called being like sympathetic to the fabric. Like you're being very thoughtful about what the fabric needs when you're sewing it, and you're not trying to force it. And different types of fabric need different types of sewing skills. Anyway, and so I just thought about that, like this being very sympathetic when you're doing these things. But then again, it can be pushed too far where you don't even realize because you have your own narrative again about what's happening. You don't even understand when someone isn't experiencing a fun knife parade. They're being terrorized by you as you're chasing them with knives.
That's some good. I think something I didn't say about hope, but I did think of, and I wanted to bring up because it's, I think, what we're talking about now, is I felt like laughter and playing games is part of hope. Like it's a very connective form of communication. And I think Lucius, when he's like, we're laughing now, like he's not ready to have the hope yet and not ready to make jokes and have levity.
Yeah, that reminds me of grief stuff. That
Yeah.
there's humor and some things that happen in grief stuff, and it doesn't feel natural sometimes, or it's like not the right time, or it's too soon, or whatever. But it's related.
That's funny because that makes me think of, first of all, Fun and Games was the episode before. But then also too that Jim, Archie, and Olawande are doing that with the mops. They're like, oh, he's drowning me. And they're like, they have voices for it where again, they're coming off of this very traumatic experience and Ed's kind of apologizing, but not, but they're again trying to move on. And that gameplay in community, again, that you're seeing multiple pirates kind of engage in that in a way to kind of like just again, like how do you kind of maybe move the energy out, or again like redirect your attention to something else. And maybe that also is what it can be, of redirecting your attention, which can be hard when you're then being asked to be quiet because there's nothing to redirect to. You actually just have to sit with the emotion and just with the feelings.
What does this, can you read the line for us again so we can say what it reminds us of in our life?
Well, like so many of our lines, we have kind of gone on to bigger ideas, but the like what's happening in the story. Okay, so this is Fang says, shh. I know what that means. I just want to. And then Fang says, shush again. So it's Ed's line. I know what that means. I just want to.
I like that he says, I just want to, because if you go on the lines prior to this, it's all like, what do you want to say? Like, you've already said that you can be quiet and you can catch a fish. Like, what else is there to say?
That makes me think of that audio clip of the guy who's on a ride that's going to drop down and he's like, wait, wait, wait. I just have to tell you something. I have to tell you something. Wait, wait, wait. I just have to tell you something. And it's like, he doesn't have anything to say. He's just like, wait, wait, wait. I know what that means. Just wait. He's like, I don't want to be quiet. It's going to be like jumping off a cliff. And he already did that in the gravy basket.
Yeah, I'm thinking about what Evelyn brought up, makes me think about too, the Ed saying, I know what that means. I just want to. So it's that, when someone says something, they say, but it's like, oh, that just negates everything you just said before. So you're like, you're saying you understand what that means, but then you're also not, taking action based on what you said you understood. Like you just want to keep doing your own thing. And so that just makes me think of times when maybe I'm just like, oh yeah, I know what that means, but I just want to, like, again, like I can recognize maybe things that are happening and I'm like, sure, I fully understand this, but I'm going to do it my own way, or I'm going to try and move forward as if this thing isn't happening. And I think again, like just a very human thing to do, you're able to fully acknowledge what's going on, and yet somehow your brain is still tricking yourself into, but I'm also going to move forward as if this thing is not happening. And I do think it's funny how our brains can do that and we don't question it. We're just like, yeah, sure, I know what that means, and I'm still gonna just keep going and do my own thing because that's what I want to do.
I can see that as a teacher, and if I was very good, I could see that in myself as a teacher. to like, you hear this educational research that says
Mhm.
actually this is not such a great practice. You're like, oh yeah, I know what that means, but I'm still gonna just do it this way. I'm still just gonna
Yes, and that makes me think of, my students, because I taught first grade and they're 6, and you'd have like, okay, I'm giving you a 5-minute warning, I'm giving you a 1-minute warning, and then I would ring the bell, and you'd have those kids who were coloring, and they're like, like I'm gonna color faster because it's like, no, you heard the bell, and it means clean up. It doesn't mean scribble furiously to finish your picture for another 30 seconds and then clean up. And so I do think it's funny that they fully acknowledge what just happened, but they're also like, I still got to get this thing done. And I think it's very funny too, from a teacher's perspective. Like, I understand what I should be doing, but, or like what best practices are, but at the same time, like, I still am going to do this other thing.
And a little bit on the flip side too of that, that sometimes in my life, that's kind of not the nicest thing to say, but sometimes in my life, in administration, in my experiences nannying, I'll see like that I want to do whatever is what I feel is best practices or ethical or like that might take longer, but in the end be better, like let a kid tie their own shoes. And I have parents that are like, I know what that means, but like, I don't really want to do it that way right now. And just times that I've been put in that situation that it's like, we're going to flip this. And I just want to do it the easier way, or I want to do it the way that's maybe not optimal. Not that I always do things optimal. I definitely don't, but
Yeah, I think we all do it all the time for so many
yeah,
different things. But I think
both.
you're right. I like your point, Katie, because I think it's those things that maybe take longer than we want to, or they're maybe a little less convenient. Or again, like we all have those letting our kids tie their own shoe moments that we use for ourselves and others and that kind of thing that I do agree. I love that you bring up that it's not really easy, but it's easier to see it in other people.
Yeah.
And like for you have very good reason why. Yes, I understand what that means, but I have this whole narrative and this whole story about why like I really just can't do that. But in other people, you can like give them the side eye of like, okay, there you go, And I do think it's funny again, the perception of when you're doing it versus when you're watching someone else do it.
I think that brings us back to hope a little bit. Like, not that that's the theme for Lectio Divina also, but that like it, being able to laugh at yourself and hope that you'll be able to grow and become like more aware or more reflective is it's a hopeful thing. In my own life, what I feel called to do with this is actually a practice that our dear Anna, our own Marmalade Mermaid, does really well. Um, because I think sometimes in life, there's definitely directives I've been given or I give myself. Um, that I will do what Ed is doing. I'm like, okay, but I know what that means that I'm just not quite ready to do giving up sugar yet because I still have gelato in the freezer, or I'm just not quite ready, but let me, and the universe is kind of asking me to do something different, or I'm asking that, or a boss or whatever. And I really like, Anna, your practice of when you want something or when I look at also as when I need to do something in order to grow and be better, to just I think you're very good at challenging yourself to live within that. Not that it's in the future, but that it's now. Like, I want to give up sugar, so I'm not going to prepare for it and plan to do this 3 weeks from now. I'm just going to go ahead and pretend like I have been doing this and keep doing this. And I don't know if I said that well, but that's that what I feel kind of is the essence of what I'm feeling called about. Not the sugar yet, though. I'm still have sugar for a little while. I've already decided that I'm more Ed that way. I'm like, not quite yet.
I know what that means. I just have a black and white cookie for my birthday, so I'm gonna wait.
Yeah, I
think
love that.
I like that too. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it's cool just being kind to yourself and that I know what that means. Yep, I know what that means. I know what those calories mean. I'm like, I'm still gonna do it. Like, I still want to. I still choose to. And I think there's
Mhm.
something super empowering and just saying like, I know what that means. And I think that goes back to something Alexis you had said about just taking action, like just owning it. Like I'm just gonna own that. Yeah, I'm not giving up sugar yet, and I'm not gonna give up cookies yet. And I think that um I think that's just really powerful to just kind of be like, yep, I know exactly what that means. And I'm walking in with my eyes open and I'm still going to enjoy this gelato or this cookie or all these other things, you know? because I think it's giving yourself that compassion and that understanding. And I think, again, like, I don't know how you tie it into hope, but I feel like there's just something very, I don't know, there's just something very gentle about it. Maybe it's not really hope, but just really gentle about it, being like, yeah, we're getting there. But I know what that means, and I'm still gonna be doing this, and I have good reasons for it, and this is my choice, and that's okay.
Both of those speak to it's mindfulness. Like, Fang is inviting Ed to be mindful and to sit with his self. And we are making these choices, but we just have to do it with some and that for me, I feel like to see it in myself. Like I recognize when others are I know what's good, but I'm just gonna do this. Like, where do I see that in myself too? And just be more mindful is my takeaway.
I like that mindful with a gentle touch. I do really appreciate that. Like expecting this to happen, expecting uh, to be successful or whatever, but to look at yourself with a lot of compassion and gentle quality.
Without judgment.
Are we ready for blessings?
Yes, who's blessing first?
I am. Oh, I didn't. I wasn't prepared to bless first. I feel like we keep coming back to some people in this episode. So I'm going to let those people be blessed by others, and I'm going to bless Buttons because I think his presence is still felt in the crew. I love that Roach asks about Buttons and is worried that Buttons might have been killed. Um, but I think his transformation and his legacy is still felt. And that he has been a beacon of hope. So bless Buttons and his seabird life. Anna, who do you bless?
Um, I'm going to bless Jim. I think blessings to Jim because Jim just has quite the ride this episode. Jim is there and hears what the priest says about the suit and about the ship. Jim knows exactly what Steed is bringing onto the ship, and then the real reason I'm blessing Jim is because Jim then is being really protective and taking care of Archie and Alawande because the salt thing and the garlic. And again, like I think that's Jim. It just seems like Jim's really taking charge of like what we need to do to keep safe and to take care of ourselves. And so I think Jim really is open with the crew about what's going on, but is not being too forceful, is not trying to attack. But again, I just think it's lovely how Jim just is showing who they care about, and they care about the crew. And they do care about, Steed understanding and showing up as the captain they need to be. And then ultimately they really care about Alawande and Archie and wanting to make sure that they're all just like huddled together in their bed, just trying to stay safe from the curse. So bless Jim.
Evelyn, who are your blessing for?
I'm going to bless Black Pete and Lucius deciding to spend the rest of their lives together. Because I think that is such a scary decision to make, especially as pirates. You guys basically they are, choosing to dedicate their lives to each other and want to stay together and like go further into this relationship, which I think that is such a scary thing to do, as I said, as pirates, because that means, if something were to happen to the other, that means that it's going to hurt a lot more than if this was just like a normal friendly pirate kind of fling kind of thing. So I bless them on that, like just dedicating their lives and wanting to go forward, because that means they just really love each other that much to want to like take a step further no matter what happens.
That's lovely. I was worried because I really wanted to bless Black Pete, and I thought, oh no, is she gonna? But I want to bless Black Pete for a different reason, so I feel like I can still do that
You
blessing.
can.
Because I'm gonna bless him on behalf of unseen pain. We literally don't see his pain on screen, but he tells us like he's been crying every night and these different things. Like, and it just makes me aware that there's probably a lot of unseen pain in some of these characters, but in this moment we get a glimpse, and to share that with Lucius is really brave, and yeah, it's like that. Communicating is very brave, and you're hoping that it's gonna be better. But just, yeah, for the unseen pains, please bless Black Pete and the others that we don't see on screen that are in pain.
Join us next time when we discuss Season 2, Episode 6, Calypso's Birthday through the theme of compassion.
All right, ladies, well done. Until next time, when we get to talk it through as a crew.
Hey, you want to come with me?
He's lying. He's blaming the bean.
Do not try this captain again.
A curse is a curse, and once it takes hold, it takes hold?